As the evening settles in, let's travel back in time to the bustling heart of ancient Rome, where marble columns glow gold in the setting sun, sandal straps slap softly on cool stone, and the smell of roasted boar, fermented fish sauce, and anxiety hangs thick in the air. You are not a senator, not a gladiator, not even a stable boy. No, tonight, you're someone far more edible. If this story helped you relax even just a little, or bored you enough to make you sleepy, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Thank you for being here. Let the evening hush surround you. Find your calm, and together we'll step softly into the story ahead. You're the imperial food taster. The latest one, at least. You're dressed simply. Plain tunic, bare feet, stomach fluttering not with hunger, but with dread. Your job is noble, technically. You protect the life of the most powerful man in the world, Emperor Domitian himself. But you don't wield a sword. You wield a spoon. And the only thing you stab is a suspicious olive. The banquet room smells delicious. It's dangerous. Guards usher you toward the emperor's table, and your knees crack audibly. To your left is a towering roast peacock, its plumage absurdly still attached. To your right, a tray of oysters glistens like gemstones left out in the sun. The servants bow, then gesture. Time to taste. First bite, peacock breast, slightly overcooked. Second, honeyed dormice, still twitching with spices. Third, garum-drenched lettuce. You wait. You swallow. You wait more. If you collapse foaming at the mouth, it means the emperor eats something else. If you don't, he eats exactly what you just ate. It's like being honored with front row seats to a lion show, except the lion might also be dinner. You weren't always a food taster. You were once a minor scribe, scribbling inventories of wine jars and sandal counts. Then one day, someone noticed you had an unusually resilient stomach, survived a batch of spoiled figs, didn't even burp. Congratulations. Your iron gut just got promoted. The job sounds straightforward, but the paranoia begins before the meal does. Each dish is prepared under tight scrutiny. Slaves cook under the eyes of other slaves. Servants aren't allowed to leave the kitchens alone. The plates are inspected, the knives counted, the wine decanted in front of 3 witnesses. And still, people die. Roman emperors were famously twitchy. After a few hundred years of coups, backstabbings, and pillow-assisted bed deaths, who could blame them? Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, all of them had moments of absolute trust in no one. The food taster, then, became not just a safeguard, but a political role. Some historians argue whether these tasters were even slaves or selected officials disguised in drab clothing. No one agrees, and no one who knew is still breathing. You, however, are breathing. For now. Dinner progresses. The emperor is in a good mood. No heads have rolled off shoulders yet. He chuckles at a bad joke told by a flatterer with too many rings. You take another bite, this time of something soft and mushroom-like. You suppress a frown. Mushrooms are dangerous. See, Romans loved them. They called them the food of the gods. But they couldn't quite tell the difference between the tasty kind and the death kind. One wrong variety, and you'd spend your final hours composing your own eulogy, sometimes from both ends. Some claim Emperor Claudius was murdered with poisoned mushrooms. Or maybe he just had bad luck with his lunch. Historians still argue whether it was Agrippina's doing or his cook's error. You chew slowly and glance at the emperor's plate. He watches you like a hawk in a silk toga. Time crawls. Your tongue tingles, but maybe that's just nerves. You're starting to understand why most tasters never live long enough to go bald. The job requires a bizarre blend of courage, idiocy, and extremely boring taste buds as you sip from the emperor's goblet, half full of watered-down wine, not nearly enough to forget your predicament. You reflect on the fact that the word poison in Latin is venenum. Sounds romantic, doesn't it? Like something whispered in a love letter. But here, it's what might be waiting in your next bite of fish paste. You're not allowed to flinch, grimace, or sweat too visibly. Any sign of discomfort could trigger panic. And remember, panicked emperors don't hand out retirement pensions. They hand out blame. So you smile faintly. Pretend to enjoy the boiled eel. Nod appreciatively at the emperor's raised eyebrow. Keep swallowing. A lot of people think being a Roman emperor meant excess. Orgies, fountains of wine, purple everything. But it also meant constant fear of betrayal, especially by those closest. Food tasters were chosen for their detachment. You're not allowed to have opinions. You're not allowed to have family. You are essentially a human smoke detector with a pulse and slightly damp hands. By the time dessert arrives, something suspiciously eggy and allegedly sweet, you feel oddly calm. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's surrender. Or maybe it's the knowledge that if you survive this shift, you'll get to sleep in a slightly larger cell tonight. If. The emperor gestures. A nod of approval. You didn't die. You may live another day. You stand back, stomach gurgling ominously, and as the candles flicker low and the plates are cleared, one of the guards mutters, "Tomorrow's feast includes pufferfish." He winks. Great. Still, you made it through this evening. Not bad for a job that starts with nibbling someone else's appetizer and ends with the faint possibility of internal combustion. The next morning, your stomach still feels like it's negotiating with itself. But you're alive, which technically makes you a success story. You shuffle into the kitchen's inner corridor, an echoing, fire-warmed tunnel full of boiling pots, muttered threats, and at least one man attempting to pluck a pheasant without swearing. Breakfast for the emperor is simple today. Dates, barley cakes, and a small dish of mussels from the Bay of Naples. They smell fine. Probably. You poke one with your knife and glance at the cook, who shrugs in the universal language of, "If it kills you, at least it wasn't my fault." Mussels are famously risky. Even the Romans knew this. They loved their shellfish, but understood that certain months brought a deadly bloom of toxins. Did this stop them? Of course not. When a Roman craves seafood, a little death is a small price to pay for flavor. So, you chew. You're getting good at hiding your nerves. You time your swallows. You listen for palace gossip while pretending to contemplate the salt level. And there's always gossip. This week, the emperor suspects his cousin of hiring a Greek apothecary to sneak powdered stone into the wine. Not poison, just finely crushed rock. The idea is to shred his insides slowly. Like drinking sandpaper, the steward whispers behind a linen curtain. Delightful. And then there are the mushrooms. Again. They're back on the menu, and you swear they look exactly like the ones from yesterday. Maybe they are. You try to act surprised. Earthy, you murmur. You do not mention the faintly blue tinge or the beetle nestled in the gills, because here's the thing. Poison wasn't always the dramatic vial under the tunic cliché. The Romans had more subtle tools. Ground glass, certain flower extracts, even toxic cosmetics. Cleopatra famously experimented with poisons on condemned prisoners, although historians still argue whether that story is exaggerated or real. You start keeping a list in your head of suspicious foods: raw seafood, mushrooms, bitter almonds, anything gifted by someone the emperor hasn't spoken to in a week. Anything with a name ending in Ella, even wine, if it smells like overripe flowers or sadness. You've begun watching how the emperor reacts to dishes, too. There's a whole code to it. A pause before chewing? Suspicion. Quick glances at his advisors? Paranoia. Immediate joyful eating? That's either confidence or total madness. You're not the only taster, of course. The emperor keeps a rotating team, reduces the chance of collusion. You've met two others. One is missing an ear and claims to have survived 4 emperors. The other is 17, deeply terrified, and constantly smells like fennel. You form an awkward, whispered alliance. Don't eat anything the emperor sends you as a thank you, the older one tells you once, with a meaningful stare. That's how they get rid of you without drama. That night's dinner includes dormice again, stuffed with pine nuts and honey, a delicacy. Also, extremely capable of masking the taste of just about anything lethal. You chew slowly, then distract yourself by counting how many guards enter and exit the chamber during the meal. 11? 1 too many. Later, in the corridor, the fennel-scented taster sidles up to you. They say last week's imperial gardener died of natural causes, he whispers, while falling down a well. You nod solemnly. That's the most natural cause of death you've heard all week. The more time you spend here, the more you notice odd things. Like the senator who always insists on tasting his own food first, because he trusts no one. Or the noblewoman who brings her own vinegar bottle to meals, claiming it cleanses the aura of assassination. That's not how vinegar works, but no one's telling her. At one banquet, you spot a man in a silver cloak sneaking crushed mint leaves into the emperor's stew. Turns out, it's a harmless attempt to soothe digestion. But for a solid 2 minutes, your palms sweat like fountains. And then there's the wild rumor, so ridiculous it has to be partly true, that someone once tried to kill an emperor by soaking parchment in hemlock, folding it into a letter, and convincing him to eat it as a snack. Historians still debate that one. But you've learned not to laugh at anything anymore. You begin to trust your nose more than your eyes. The sour whiff of fermented milk? Normal. The sudden scent of almond in a non-almond dish? Deeply abnormal. You once halt an entire meal because the stew smells like old paint. Turns out it was fine. You earn a slap. But also a promotion. Small victories. But the job does something to your brain. You start imagining poison in everything. Bread crusts, steam, that innocent sprig of parsley. You start dreaming in recipes. Only all of them end with someone clutching their throat. The emperor, oddly enough, doesn't seem nearly as afraid as you. Sometimes he laughs when you gag on an overly salted anchovy. He calls you his brave canary. You smile, but not with your eyes. Tonight's wine has a hint of resin and fig. You sip, as usual, then you wait. Your stomach flips, and not because of poison. It's the pressure, the unbearable quiet between swallow and breath. You wonder if your heart can actually burst from dread. Spoiler, it doesn't. You live. Again. And that, ironically, makes you more useful. You're not dead. You're reliable. You're beginning to suspect you might even be trusted. But don't get comfortable. Remember that time someone tried to smuggle poison inside a cooked egg? They blew out the contents, filled the shell with liquid death, and resealed it. That kind of creativity never retires. Still, you walk out of the dining chamber with steady feet. You've made it through another day of risky recipes, subtle insults, and surprise garnishes. Maybe the most dangerous thing you consumed was the idea that you're safe. Tomorrow, there's a rumor about exotic fruit arriving from Hispania. Papery skin, unknown seeds, extremely hard to test for toxins, delightful. You've stopped tasting food with your mouth alone. Now, you taste with your eyes, your ears, your fingertips. Each dish is a mystery, each bite a riddle, and every meal a potential epitaph. You don't just survive dinner anymore. You navigate it like a blindfolded tightrope walker over a pit of snakes wearing chef hats. The Emperor seems to enjoy your company lately. You're summoned early, allowed to sip the morning honeyed wine before anyone else. He watches you as you chew a fig, leaning forward like a child, waiting for a magician to reveal a card. Still alive? Good. That means the fig was probably fine. You nod. He smiles. A servant exhales in relief. One more hour without incident. Your stomach grumbles quietly, an unfortunate side effect of learning to distrust every aroma. You've started skipping meals outside your tasting duties, partly out of caution and partly because your appetite has grown shy. But your instincts are sharper than ever. Today's luncheon arrives with cheerful fanfare, a wild boar roasted in vinegar, cloves, and something that smells like ambition. You slice, sniff, sample. It's fine. But the Emperor's mood isn't. He's fidgety, quiet. He barely touches the spiced pears. That's when you notice the mood shift around the table. Advisors whisper. One guest is suddenly unwell. A young scribe excuses himself to check on his sandals. Never returns. Something is in the air, and it's not just the boar. You wonder if the Emperor has received a threat. Maybe someone in the Senate mentioned the word succession one too many times. Or maybe the boar was overcooked again. He leans over and murmurs, "If you ever feel your heart stutter, let me know before it stops." You manage a smile that says, "Of course, my lord," even as your own heart politely bangs on your ribcage like it's trying to escape. That night, you meet the other tasters in the scullery, far from imperial ears. The old one's eyes look tired in the candlelight. Ever notice the Emperor only smiles when you don't flinch? He says. It's not the food. It's the control. You nod. You've felt it too. He continues. Once had a friend who worked for Nero. Said Nero made his taster drink vinegar just to see how long he'd pucker. That's awful, the fennel-scented one whispers. That's normal, the old man replies. You don't sleep that night. You stare at the ceiling of your quarters, which is painted with stars. Cheap plaster. Cracks in the corner. You imagine someone slipping crushed laurel into your wine, not out of malice, but out of boredom. There's something uniquely terrifying about being killable for the sake of curiosity. You begin memorizing antidotes. Not that you'd ever get the chance to administer one. Still, it helps you pretend. Milk thistle, ground pearl, charcoal and honey, snake bile. You've seen them all applied, most often to someone else. Some historians claim the Emperor's inner circle developed taster training manuals, probably apocryphal, but you like the idea. Page 1, don't die. Page 2, if you do die, die quickly and with useful symptoms. The hardest part isn't the food, it's the waiting. Tonight's stew includes lentils, wine, and something purple. You sample it. Wait. Nothing. Then your chest feels tight. Not poisoned. Just nervous. But how would you even know the difference? You glance up. The Emperor is watching. Always watching. You nod again. He lifts his spoon. You've begun tracking his moods the way a farmer watches the sky. A wrinkle in his brow? Rain's coming. A playful pun? Fair weather. Silence with no smirk? Storm. He sometimes tests you. Offers food he hasn't approved. Smiles as he does it. You pretend not to notice. You taste it anyway. It's always fine. But you wonder what would happen if it wasn't. The other tasters say it's a test of loyalty, or maybe amusement, or both. Why don't you just run? The youngest one asks you once. Where? You answer. He'd just hire someone slower. You've heard of other emperors' tasters. One who tried to fake his death with chalk and goat's blood. One who allegedly swapped places with a twin. One who vanished into the Alps, where he now lives as a beekeeper. You admire the creativity, but your knees are terrible, and you don't like bees. And then there's the dinner, when you're not invited. A small private meal. The Emperor dines alone. You wait by your chamber. No one calls for you. You wonder if it's over. You wonder if you've been replaced, or worse, if he's testing a new taster. Hours pass. Then, a knock. You're summoned. Not to taste, but to watch. You're placed at the edge of the hall, seated beside a pillar, handed a goblet of cooled wine. The Emperor lifts a grape. No tasters tonight, he says aloud. Just hunger. He eats it slowly, then another, then a slice of fish. Your heart races. If he dies now, you'll still be blamed. You sit upright, silently praying that those grapes weren't washed with suspicion. But he doesn't die. He finishes his plate, wipes his fingers, laughs. You realize something chilling. Tonight, the food wasn't the test. You were. You passed. The next morning, you're handed a slightly nicer cloak. Your name is murmured in new corridors. A patrician you've never met nods at you like you've joined a secret club. You haven't been promoted. But something has shifted. Now you are not just the taster. You are his taster. The personal one. The trusted one. The replaceable one. Just a little less so. You wake before dawn now, not out of duty, out of habit. The palace is quiet this early, the marble halls still cold from the night air, the bronze lamps flickering as if unsure whether to stay lit or give up and sleep in. You walk the same corridors, but they feel different. You're no longer shadow. You're a fixture. The Emperor knows your name now. That should make you feel safer. It doesn't. Today's breakfast is porridge, dried apricots, and a hard-boiled egg that might actually be a weapon in disguise. You rotate it in your palm before cracking it open. It's clean. No suspicious powder, no strange scent. Still, you sniff it like a detective with a grudge. You take a bite. It's bland. That's good. Poison rarely tastes boring. Still, you chew as though the fate of an empire rests on your molars. By midday, you're tasting imported delicacies from far-off provinces. Candied lotus root from Egypt. A salty cheese wrapped in fig leaves from Gaul. Something pale and gelatinous, allegedly from Armenia, though no one is quite sure what part of what animal it once belonged to. As you chew, the Emperor leans over and says, "You know, if someone really wanted to kill me, they'd poison the olive oil." You nod. lips still glistening with said olive oil. Then let's hope they prefer vinegar, you say. He laughs, but you file it away. You've started studying the old poisons, not just the ones from rumor, but the legendary ones. Slow-acting resins, concoctions derived from snake venom, toxins brewed from yew berries and patience. Some say Mithridates VI of Pontus took small doses of poison daily to build immunity. Historians still debate whether that actually worked, or if it just made his breath smell awful. You consider the same strategy, briefly. Then remember you once broke out in hives from nutmeg. Best not to tempt fate. There's a new taster this week, a young man from the provinces. You recognize the nervous shifting, the way he watches the door more than the food. You pull him aside. Rule 1, you whisper. Never look surprised. If you drop dead, try to do it discreetly. He blinks. You sigh. That was a joke. Sort of. You now know more about death than anyone who hasn't died yet. You've memorized the early signs of belladonna poisoning. You've learned how to distinguish between beetle-laced honey and just weird honey. You've practiced breathing in slowly, so your body doesn't mistake nerves for nausea. And you can now identify 5 types of mushroom by smell alone, a skill useful only here or in the world's worst salad bar. Still, you live, again and again. It's a strange sort of immortality, one earned in tiny increments. Each meal survived is a silent victory. You don't get medals. You get warm baths, and sometimes a slightly less lumpy pillow. The emperor tells you, between bites of melon, you're the last person I trust with my life. That's sweet, but also deeply alarming. Because what happens when he stops trusting you? Or worse, what happens when someone else does? There are whispers now that you've grown too close, that your loyalty might shift with the winds, that one day you might use your access for something more decisive. You laugh at the idea, but not too hard. Because once a taster is seen as a threat, he's no longer a taster. He's a suspect. You begin to notice the other advisors watching you during meals. Subtle, sideways glances, a missing smile, a door that closes a little too slowly when you pass. You don't know whether the emperor notices, or if he orchestrates it. You chew slower these days, not because you're afraid of poison, because you're afraid of perception. Still, the food keeps coming. Stewed lentils, lamb stuffed with dates, wine infused with pepper and myrrh. The emperor has taken to offering you the first sip from his own cup, like a strange form of affection. One night, over slices of pear soaked in red wine, he asks, "What would you do if I died at this table?" You swallow, twice. Choke on my own guilt. He grins. Good answer. He doesn't finish the pear. There's a certain peace in routine, even deadly routine. You know which dishes are safest, which cooks tremble too much, which plates arrive hotter than they should. You build a mental map of patterns. It soothes you. And yet, there's no promotion in this line of work, no ladder to climb. You are, essentially, standing in the same spot every day, just with a slightly different menu. You wonder how it ends. Not dramatically, not in a burst of poison and shouting. No, you picture your story ending with a single wrong bite, unnoticed by everyone but your stomach. A slow blur, a wobble, then silence. Or maybe you simply vanish one day, quietly replaced by a younger version of yourself. One who chews less suspiciously, smiles more, one who hasn't yet memorized the taste of panic. But for now, you sit at the long marble table, You take another bite. It's figs. Sweet. Unpoisoned. You survive again. And somewhere in the distance, the palace begins preparing tomorrow's menu. So now, you lie back. No dagger in your hand. No secret vial in your belt. No plate of questionably purple stew before you. Just the soft quiet of the night. A gentle hum of sleep rolling toward you like fog across a Roman bathhouse floor. The job may have been dangerous, ridiculous, even thankless. But in a strange way, it had its own rhythm. A slow dance between fear and trust, between flavor and fate. You were the last line of defense and the first bite of dinner. The unsung hero of the emperor's digestive peace. And now it's over. The banquet has faded. The torches have burned low. And the emperor sleeps deeply, unknowing. You are safe. For tonight, at least. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of palace marble and silver platters lift off your shoulders. Let the taste of honeyed figs and distant flute music lull your thoughts. The danger has passed. The plates have been cleared. The story has softened. The world grows quiet now, slow and steady. Let the silence settle. Let the stillness bloom. You did well, food taster. You lived. And now, it's time to drift away into your own soft shadow. Let go. Sleep. You're safe now.